welcome back to my channel. Bonsoir et bienvenue sur ma chaîne. My name is Muriel and this video will be episode 2 of a bookworm in Gamerland. In this episode I will be talking about the indie gem that is Hollow Knight. Indeed, a true little gem created by Australian team Cherry. I first played Hollow Knight during the first lockdown in the spring of 2020. I got wind of it through an internet acquaintance who sold it to me as Bloodborne but with insects, so Bugborne. At that point, I didn't have a PlayStation 4 yet. I hadn't actually played a Soulsborne game, but that little game looked really intriguing and I really liked the art style, and I saw it was available to play on a computer, and more specifically a MacBook, because that is what I have. So that's what I played it on, though you can play it on other consoles as well. And it was such a lovely experience. My first ever Metroidvania, because Hollow Knight is a 2D Metroidvania. I've played games that involve platforming before, but never a game that was officially classified as a Metroidvania, I guess. It was also my first Souls-like game before I actually played a real Soulsborne game. And indeed, Bugborne is a good way of describing it. I would propose an alternative way of describing it. Imagine if Dark Souls and A Bug's Life had a video game baby is how I'm going to sell it. And the lovely thing about Hollow Knight is I got it on sale too. Now, the full price for this game is insanely cheap as it is, but I got it for 50% off on Steam. Best price to quality ratio for a video game ever. I really didn't know what I was going to get out of it. I didn't have any specific expectations going in, but wow, that game blew my mind. Now, once again, I'll give the very basest of premises for Hollow Knight. So you play as the knight, this little insect that has a little nail for a sword. I would assume it's somewhat modelled of some kind of stag beetle, because it's got little horns, doesn't have a mouth, but just has this little cape. Basically, I represented it right there, so that's what it looks like. That's what you play as. And you wake up in this cave and very quickly make your way to Dirtmouth, this little village in the middle of nowhere within a very dreary, sad atmosphere, before making your way down through the ruined kingdom of Hallownest. And Hallownest has pretty significant backstory that you're meant to explore and figure out sort of slowly what exactly happened in Hallownest and who are you? Because who is this little knight you're playing as? There's a backstory to it as well, and you'll discover the story by meeting NPCs and things like that, obviously. A bit like a Soulsborne game, this is the kind of game that really delves into storytelling through environmental narration by picking up clues from NPCs you meet along your quest. You're not handheld through the story of this game, and you can speculate, as have many people already, about the exact story of this game, the why and the how of things. I would recommend, if you don't know his videos yet, Mossbag's lore videos, though other creators have delved into this game as well. There's quite a nice active fandom for Hollow Knight, I've noticed, and I personally follow the creator Rusty for some of his Hollow Knight videos, but for lore I would definitely point you to Mossbag's videos. Hollow Knight is, again, a bit like Bloodborne, a bit like Dark Souls. It takes place in this world that is decaying. In fact, ruined, if we're talking about Hallownest specifically. There's a lot of sad musical notes going around. A lot of the NPCs go through bad things, and you have NPCs who are lost, NPCs who go crazy because there is kind of a strange plague going on, an infection civilization that might have its origins in something a bit cosmic-y. I wouldn't argue there's cosmic horror, outright cosmic horror in Hollow Knight. It's not a horror game, but there is that dark background, storytelling. And yeah, it's a world that has fallen to ruins, a civilization that has fallen to ruins, but you'll figure out how and why by playing the game, obviously. I don't want to spoil too much of it. And so the NPCs, like I said, are pretty few and far between. I'd say overall that you encounter nicer NPCs, or I mean more of the nice kind of NPCs than you would in something like Bloodborne or Dark Souls. But again, you are pretty much alone. You're on your own trying to figure out what happened, trying to survive, because lots of things are trying to kill you, though perhaps less outright malevolently than in a game like, Bloodborne or Dark Souls. And this game being actually quite large, there is a nice variety of environments here again, though there's a beautiful cohesion to those environments. It all fits together because it's all part of this fallen kingdom of Hallownest. But then you also have these adjacent bug cultures, and their cultural signatures expressed through, the environments, the visual signatures of some pieces of architecture, of decoration. It all comes together to make this lovely, immersive whole. And Hollow Knight being a Metroidvania, it's a game that strongly encourages exploration. I was floored to notice how many things I'd missed by watching other players go through the game, most notably Rusty's playthroughs. I was like, oh, well, I completely missed that. There's so many things you can discover in Hallownest. You're definitely rewarded for going through a level again later in the game, when you've acquired additional platforming skills and things like that. And like I said, it starts out feeling like a relatively small but enjoyable game, but then you get to a certain point, about a quarter of the way in, I suppose. You get to this basically nexus level / area, and then the world of the game just expands, and you're like, wow, I still have all of that to go through. That was a wonderful feeling, and I was like, did I seriously only pay €7.50 for this game? This is insane. And it's also the kind of game that has multiple endings, so if you really want to explore how the story could turn out in different ways, you can, and you can get different achievements for different endings. And some endings are better than others because there's an ending that really gives you a lot more lore-related context and boss-related types of things. And yes, it's a game that also gets quite hard. It's the first truly difficult game I've ever played. Before Bloodborne, before Dark Souls 3, I would definitely argue that those games are just a level above something like Hollow Knight, but Hollow Knight is still hard. I was quite surprised by how easily I was being killed, and this beautiful little game with a cartoony art style was like, what is this? This is really different. So yes, it's also a Souls-like game in that respect, most definitely. And the first thing that really drew me to Hollow Knight, beyond the fact that it was sold to me as Bloodborne with insects, was the art style. The art style of Hollow Knight is at the same time simple and just very, very pretty. It's colourful, yet sad as well in a lot of its environments. There's a nice variety to the environments, like I already said. So it's just a delight to go through each level and then discover a new level, be immersed in a new type of atmosphere. And it was just so pretty. Like, it's a drawn art style, a bit cartoony, I suppose. And yet it communicates so much feeling, but feelings which are quite, like I said, sad, melancholic, conveying decay, ruin, the passage of time, the falling of great civilizations into dust, and, darker, scarier things. Deep Nest, am I right? Those of you in the know will understand that reference. So yeah, I was just really impressed by the art style of Hollow Knight. It's such a beautiful game. Simple, like I said, but so pretty. Such a delight to explore. It's the kind of art style that really, inspired me creatively, hence this. The characters themselves kind of follow this formula of simplistic, but simplistic doesn't mean bad, little insect-type figures. And most of the characters, NPCs, are basically modeled off some kind of insect or another. There are only a few things in there that aren't immediately identifiable as insect-like. But so yeah, you have these fairly simple characters, these little insect-like characters, and then you have these lush backgrounds, and then the platforming design, which was brilliant and highly enjoyable. White Palace, am I right? Maybe enjoyable was not quite the right word for that one, but it was definitely a good challenge, I'll say that. And then when it came to the soundtrack and the sound design, there again I was just really impressed by this little indie game. I mean, I didn't really have any experience prior to Hollow Knight playing indie games, I guess. I didn't have any negative feelings towards them, I just, didn't really know what could interest me. But Hollow Knight really opened my eyes to what you can do as, I guess, an indie game developer and as someone who then plays said games, because the OST was just so pretty too. Beautiful, haunting, so melodious, and the brilliant thing is that there were a lot of piano notes in a lot of the OSTs. Now, as with most other games I've played, there's music for the levels themselves, and then you have tracks for the boss battles. And so given the predominance of piano notes or easily transcribable, well, I mean, piano is a string instrument, but things like violins or cellos, that means I found a few pieces of sheet music for some of the OSTs. So I actually play a few tunes from Hollow Knight on the piano. So yeah, just a haunting soundtrack that just, went straight to my heart and just such a delight to play. But it is quite sad. But, sad things can be beautiful as well. And honestly, that's another thing I really appreciated. All of the music matched perfectly well with the levels or with the boss fights. A lot of the music got faster and more intense with some of the more intense boss fights, and those boss fights can get very intense, but I'll get back to that in a minute. So yeah, I really love the music. Though I guess if I had to choose, I probably preferred overall the level OSTs than the boss ones. And if I had to list off some of my favorite tracks, I would definitely include the one for Dirtmouth, which is basically the first one you encounter, and I can play that on the piano. The one for Resting Grounds is really beautiful, and I can do that as well on the piano. And then Green Path. There's something absolutely mesmerizing about Green Path, and I'm currently learning that one on the piano as well, but it's a bit more complicated. And when it comes to the sound design, again, it was good enough that I felt really immersed in the levels, even though it's not a 3D game, it's, a cartoony, drawn art style. But yeah, the little sound elements of, stalactites falling, of water dripping through the ground that is above Hallow Nest, the enemy sounds, everything was just beautifully articulated to make you really feel like you were there in the game in Hallow Nest. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, Hollow Knight is probably the first really hard game in a way I ever played. Like, it's not unplayable or undoable by any means, obviously. I mean, if I do say so myself, I 112%ed it with a keyboard, no less, not even a controller, because I didn't know at the time that you could buy a console controller to play games on your computer, something which I remedied afterwards. But so yes, I actually beat the game, 112%ed it with a keyboard. I am proud about that fact. But so yes, it was hard. I was quite surprised by how difficult it actually was because, I don't know, seeing those little cartoony bugs, these really pretty drawn environments, I wasn't expecting a bit of a slap in the face, really. Though, again, given I'd been told it was basically Bloodborne / Dark Souls with insects, I should have figured out that it would probably emulate the difficulty level or the steep learning curve of those kinds of games somewhat. Now, being a Metroidvania, it also involves quite interesting platforming sections, which increase in difficulty as well. Once again, I'll mention the White Palace. The platforming was a lot of fun, though it was really bloody difficult at times with the keyboard. There's a certain section of the game in Deep Nest, a brilliant example of what I was saying about the sound design quality and the immersive quality of the environments. Deep Nest is very creepy. If you're arachnophobic, I would not recommend it. If you're centipedophobic, I would not recommend it. But so there's a bit in that level where you basically have to pogo, so jump with your little nail sword, on these huge moving centipedes. And you have to dodge around stalactites. It's kind of crazy. You don't really have to do it, it's optional, but it gives you a nice little reward. And I stuck through with it, and I did it. And the feeling I got when I accomplished that was amazing. That was my first taste of that insane shoot of dopamine you get when you accomplish something really hard in a game, which I then got in spades in Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. But that journey started with Hollow Knight, most definitely. You definitely can experience that feeling of struggling and raging against a difficult platforming section or a difficult boss fight, and then feeling godlike when you triumph at last. Because yes, some of those boss fights are also quite challenging, and I'm, among others, thinking of a certain creepy moth deity that invades Bug's dreams. If you've played the game, you know what I'm referring to. That was very, very intense, but I prevailed, I vanquished it, and felt great, awesome. I had beaten the game, gotten the true ending, and felt victorious. But I mean, it also comes at the cost of just raging ridiculously for a long while as well. I mean, I remember struggling with the Soul Master boss. He was really freaking annoying. And in fact, I mentioned this in my Bloodborne video. I had to lower the volume of the boss OST because I was just so stressed. My fingers were cramped from being on that keyboard. And when I finally killed it, I was like, this is ridiculous, but just so rewarding as well. Hollow Knight is a game that rewards you a bit like the Soulsborne games for being attentive, for being quick with your reflexes, and being observant, and, well yeah, reacting quite quickly and knowing when to strike, when to dodge, when to jump over an enemy. So it really hones those skills over time as you play the game. And at the end, I got pretty good indeed. I got good. It's also a game you can complete in different ways. There is no one way of going through the game. I mean, there's some major steps, and there's lots of optional content, basically. But you can go about the game in various different ways and avoid certain things in one playthrough, or, do them in a second playthrough. So, for example, I actually let Zote die in my main playthrough. I didn't realize that NPC had a whole questline associated with him, that he became some kind of insane boss in the Colosseum, I think. And I was like, oh, so that would have happened if I'd actually saved him from the jewels of the... I can't remember, it doesn't matter. Basically, this big mosquito entry-level boss just munching on this poor little dude called Zote. And I thought to myself, okay, I'll come back and save that dude later, but then I came back and his skull was on the ground and just kind of kicked it. I got an achievement for it though, so it didn't, preclude me from 112%ing the game, but still I was very surprised by that. And there are different outcomes you can get with one of the DLCs as well. And also, small note, but I mean, you buy the main game, it comes by default with the DLC, which is pretty amazing as well. And I've seen players just sequence break as well and go about, completing the major steps of the game in different orders and different ways. So that's really neat as well. You can just go through this game again and again, and you'll never have quite the same experience. It's also a game which comes with a no death option. Once you've beaten it for the first time, you have this thing called a Steel Soul run. You cannot die. If you die, your save file gets basically, busted. I haven't done that yet. I'm tempted to though, because it does come with an achievement, but that's kind of next level and I just haven't done it. I think I did start a Steel Soul playthrough, but then kind of let it go because again, have this weird relationship with video games, especially if I've actually completed it once. I'll take my time coming back to it, in the future. Ultimately, Hollow Knight was just really special. I never played anything resembling it, really. I was enchanted by this, fairly sad world, yes, but those little insect characters. And I had a lot of fun identifying the types of insects some of the enemy types or some of the NPCs were derived from. I also really enjoyed the fact that there was a bestiary you could complete. But so yeah, Hollow Knight was really special. Special in a way that made me, for example, want to draw the characters. I'm so excited for the sequel, Silk Song, which should come out at some point. It is in development, and the gameplay for Silk Song, the little bit we've seen of it, looks amazing. Much more complex, much more involved, so they'll probably improve on a lot of the great things in Hollow Knight. If you enjoy indie games, if you enjoy Souls-like games, if you enjoy, Metroidvanias, I would definitely highly recommend you check Hollow Knight out. Only for the premise of a Dark Soulsian bug's life in a way, I guess. And I mean, they're little, nods to something like Dark Souls. The magic you use is called Soul, for example. And I mean, fine, Dark Souls doesn't own a patent on the concept of soul, we're all agreed, but still, I think they're obvious little nods and winks to those types of games as well, which made it extra fun, especially once I started playing Dark Souls 3 and I could think back on Hollow Knight and just, see the similarities. So I hope you found this second little episode of A Bookworm in Gamerland interesting. If you're part of the Hollow Knight fandom and want to gush about this game in the comments down below, you're more than welcome to do so. I hope you will have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Do take good care of yourselves, and I shall see you all reasonably soon in another video, probably my monthly reading wrap-up. Yes, I do need and want to get back to books as well. But until then, bye-bye!